Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody to Alicia Ahoen's final presentation for her Master of Architecture thesis on industrial wasteland, the revitalization of Hamilton. We have two guests joining us, Gail Shillingford from Dialogue, a landscape architect from Dialogue, and Ari Mazzeo, who's a researcher from MIT and working in Canada at the moment, I believe. We also have the supervisory team of Leila Farrar and Terry Peters from Ryerson, and I'm the program rep. My name is Mark Orgolewski, and Mark is also with us. So I'd like to welcome everybody, and the format, Alicia, I think you know, you get to present for about 20 minutes or so, and then we'll have any questions of clarification, and then we'll have a discussion about your thesis, and then we'll the committee will discuss the thesis in private. So if you're ready, Alicia, let's start the presentation.
Okay, thank you. Industrial wasteland, the revitalization transcribed. Increasing levels of pollution from industrial sectors and municipal waste have limited public water access. For decades, industrial practices were prioritized, ignoring the resulting water, soil, and air contamination. While waterfront industrial and municipal factories are important for economic growth and maintaining the city's heritage, these contaminated structures can be transcribed into revitalized and resource systems. The once severed urban waterfronts have the unique opportunity to reconnect the public with the water's ecosystem, establish deep connections, and create a sense of place. Cleansing biodomes on the coastline are a prosperous alternate way of rectifying the damage caused by pollutants. Reviving our land, water, and atmosphere assets will create a new, distinctive, and mixed-use way of sensorial experiences. How to transform contaminated and severed waterfront piers into revitalized resource systems for a prosperous mixed-use shoreline. Industrial sites often dominate waterfronts, blocking views and obstructing potential recreational uses. Many have become remembrance of the past, whereas they are no longer in use and dangerous to both the public and the environment. The case study analysis included examination of contamination types that other waterfront studies have encountered and methods used for remediation. This was done through multiple ways, such as a park that reclaims a portion of the riverbank to re-engage the community through connected pedestrian spaces, or the construction of a learning barge to provide environmental education and public access to otherwise inaccessible river due to the pollution and industry. Maintaining character of place with activities have increased people's use of the public realm. Through this review, 5 key principles were determined to decontaminate urban waterfronts and activate the public realm. Reclaiming post-industrial waterfront sites have accomplished with masterful planning and urban and architectural design to convert decaying land and buildings into vibrant parks and stimulating cultural destinations. These case studies have really pushed for the public realm, but for this thesis, contamination is the driving force and will push waste resource one step further. The contaminated waterfront precedents provide valuable information on revitalization. However, the process is slow and often decontamination is not fully complete before pedestrianization. Biodomes are the framework chosen for this thesis to expedite the water reclamation and allow the community to experience blue biophilia. This thesis is pushing biodome architecture further to encapsulate an existing polluted site for water, soil, and air purification instead of sealing off the land. Now turning to Hamilton Harbor's contamination. It is on the western end of Lake Ontario. The growing population of the bay's water caused the city to infill the land and the shoreline. Industrial land took over, causing pollution to the water, soil, and air, deeming Hamilton the most contaminated state on the Great Lakes, Canada. There are 3 main waste contributors in Hamilton Harbor: our steel industries, municipal waste discharges, and urban runoff. The causes PAHs, E. coli, and cyanobacteria to flood the water. Historically, industrial land used soil as the ultimate sink for all pollutants, which induced toxic and negative effects that quality and change the properties of the soil. There is a presence of heavy metals, pesticides, PHs, and VOCs. The main source of air pollution in Hamilton include both industrial and municipal sources, vehicle exhaust, transformation sectors. There are elevated total suspended particles and metals due to local fugitive dust sources. This led to the site selection, with primary concentration and contamination bordering around Piers 16 to 20. Therefore, this is the greatest area of concern. It requires remediation immediately. This location is the heart of the harbor, both geographically and symbolically. Reconfiguration or repurposing of the site has the potential to dismantle the industrial border and the city's separation from the waterfront. There are opportunities to transform the contamination waste into clean and healthy building resources. Vitrification can be used to decontaminate the soil. High temperatures are used to melt and fuse contaminants in the soil. Heat is delivered to the soil by electrodes and is co-generated with the ongoing operation of Stelco's factories. After the soil is melted, electrodes are shut off, allowing the soil and trapped contaminants to cool into a stable glass. The glass byproduct of vitrification process has the opportunity to showcase the waste material. It is 10 times stronger than concrete and is able to withstand freeze-thaw cycles. Vitrification can reach depths of 9.1 meters to 12.2 meters and a maximum surface area of 8.5 meter radius for vitrified glass. Another way to transform contamination to a resource is with the abundance of suspended particles in the atmosphere surrounding the steel industry. They are harmful to humans, but they could be transformed and recycled into new resources. Current realistic examples are bricks, tile, ink, and jewelry. This is done by collecting air particles from suspended vacuum and then manufacturing the residue into the next recycled life. After collection, the particles are mixed with clay for bricks, or iron technology can turn the dust into a gemstone, or mix with alcohol and oil to turn into ink. During the process, the air is purified and released. In addition, there is a possibility to harvest waste materials surrounding the chosen site for reuse, recycle, upcycle, and/or downcycle into proposed architecture. There's abundance of steel scrapyards within a short distance from Pier 16 to be used to locally source material. Metals can be continuously recycled without altering their properties, making steel the most recycled material globally. Stelco could be involved in the construction of biodomes. Local products, involvement, and recycled materials connect the industry to the city and its place. The trend of deindustrialization, as observed by Stelco, is a global one. Stelco's company grew exponentially and continued to increase their site with man-made piers, stretching further and further into the harbor. This development further decreased and then fully disconnected public access to the waterfront. Stelco's coke ovens and cold rolling operations remain functional in Hamilton, which needs to be considered as part of this pursuit for the mixed-use thesis. The location for waste disposal on the north side of the site is why this area is chosen, because it's the most contaminated and therefore most crucial area requiring remediation. In Randall Reef, adjacent to Stelco, there is a current project under construction for an engineered containment facility. It sits on top of the most contaminated sediments to stop the pHs from spreading into the water column. Filling the harbor with man-made land is not a new concept for Hamilton. It is allocating new land to the industry rather than making it public beach or park. There is an abundance of waste/vacant land on the piers that could be alternately reconstructed. The thesis herein proposes a different approach to remediation, which does not hide pollution, but rather harvests it, uses it, and builds it as a resource. Given the severity of Hamilton Harbor's contamination, a rejuvenation of water, soil, and air needs to be inhibited before the public can return. This is the proposal to design the process of transforming a toxic landscape. It is proposed through 5 principles and a series of 10 phases. One site is excavated and vitrification process begins to remediate the pollution in the soil. A large closed system biodome is constructed on the top of the chosen site to accelerate the remediation. The stable glass byproduct is the main recycled material used in the construction of the biodome. The glass is partially transparent and casts a green glow shadow caused by illumination, making a bold statement. The large biodome provides a safe area to occupy the architectural environment for construction, moderating, and research to take place. The glass is collected and utilized into panels with steel from adjacent industries. The vitrified glass sizes can be unpredictable, so the panels allow for size variation. This unconventional form can be accomplished using a manufactured engineered bonding structure and a repurposed coil steel to cap and protect the structure from weathering elements instead of using stainless steel. The caps, with time, will show their patina. There are three biodome typologies constructed for remediation of the water, soil, and air before allowing public access. The goal is to allow pedestrians to safely enjoy the waterfront as a variety of experiential ways previously unimagined. There is a navigation device for cell phones by scanning a QR code or by downloading the app. The app takes an individual on a self-guided journey to educate them in the support of the environmental development. The contamination count and remediation efforts would be updated daily, and the biodome's changing locations can be known at any particular time, anywhere in the world. Action is required to reduce the combined sewer overflows and various contaminants dumped into the water. This remediation could be accomplished by mobile water purifying domes. These units can be transported through the water depending where they detect the contamination, similar to a freshwater algae eater. Towards the west of the site, there's typically combined affluent, while the steel mill on the east, making this location ideal to begin the reparations. They can be dispatched from the large biodome once the water inside has been cleared from contamination. These biodomes swim like a diving submarine. The nostalgic aesthetic of the water biodomes was inspired by Stelco's steel supplies of the Second World War ships and army transports. This occurred during Stelco's profitable years, prior to this mistreatment of their employees, which led to multiple strikes. The primary proposed construction material is high alloyed steel with a shell comprised of repurposed weathered rolled steel, treated with a protective coating to preserve the raw aesthetic without compromising the material. The viewing hatch, made of vitrified glass, would be chosen from a sample based on its clarity to optimize transparency. The thickness will also be needed to determine for water pressure. The water purifying domes include 3 stations, 4 pods attached to a mothership, and a recycled water treatment plant. The pods are deployed for extraction and bottom sediment control, and the mothership exchanges the contamination and is used for research. Once the biodome reach their pollution capacity, they travel to the treatment plant to discard their wastes. To enter the diving pod, access is on the shore to pick up the passengers for a viewing and experiential experience. The glass door hatch opens for the pedestrians to enter the diving pod. The guests are strapped into their seats to allow for tipping and sudden changes in direction. Each diving pod can be booked up to 8 guests. The single circular glass viewing hatch allows the public to view the bottom of the harbor and how remediation is accomplished in their pod through hydraulic dredge and a thin layer capping. Each guest has the option to steer the pod through the app. The initial visits reveal a vacant, polluted body of water, but this is intended to impact the viewer. This experience can be combined with visual information projection on the hatch within the pod of the ecosystem that has once there and images of what will be there again following the completion of the remediation process. The global prevalence of pHs and their toxicity have become a challenge in remediating contaminated soils. For the purposes of Hamilton Piers, phytoremediation and vitrification have been chosen. They are the most contaminated sections of land. Soil decontaminated biodomes can be placed in the undisturbed harbor to mediate this revitalization. Like the other domes, the form and aesthetic would be fashioned by available steel sources to be repurposed and celebrated. The biodome style is meant to articulate the current 2021 wasteful conditions of the decomposing piers and weathered steel junkyards. There would only be one inactive stationary biodome, while the other smaller steel ones could be transported to different sections of the harbor in need of soil remediation and to produce the glass. The stationary soil biodome is used as a cap to host pedestrian exploration. The pattern form inside each triangle piece is determined by available vitrified glass sizes and the reclamation of steel to fasten the glass together. Once the area is deemed safe for public access, visitors would have the ability to travel down the excavation tunnel to witness the soil's inflow layers. The biodome lights up when vitrification is taking place somewhere in the harbor. The lighting assess with the understanding of the slow but constant decontamination work taking place. This offers a visual of the cleansing process, which contributes to education and experiential impact. The bottom of the excavation tunnel offers a year-round green space with purposeful phytomated planting, an archaeological dig, and the potential for recreational rock climbing. Reduced exposure to air pollution is a goal for improving overall health and reduce the amount of premature deaths in Hamilton. The primary route of exposure is in the human body as through the lungs and respiratory tract after inhalation, along with improved green space and air purifying biodome is proposed. Aesthetically, the air purifying biodome will be more contemporary as it is intended to celebrate the future of decontamination. It will embody a collection of sensory aspects and to represent the typically invisible air. The dark samples of vitrified glass material will be applied to the biodome and will showcase the material over the steel counterparts. The recycled steel in the structure will be concealed for only visible when necessary to connect the vitrified glass and symbolize a modern lightness. There are long rectangular vents which host the steel bankhouse enclosure connecting to the exterior of the large biodome. The exterior components would host flying air drones, which can be dispatched as required around the harbor to collect harmful particles. The sealed pneumatic bag is attached to the drone's back, and when it is full, they return for treatment at the large biodome. During the process, the dust is exchanged and collected to be reconfigured into a resource. The dust can be used for tiles, landscape, interlock, and natural storm resources from the Hamilton Mountain. The contamination data from existing air monitoring towers will depict where they fly. They typically fly in packs or swarms, giving the community a visual indication of where the concentration is. They can be tracked on the app with updated levels and whereabouts of the contamination. This can be helpful in providing awareness to pedestrians as there are changes in the elevated air movements that are visible to the eye. Pedestrians can interact with this process by traveling up the glass elevator to reach the top platform where they have the ability to walk through the air purifying dome. To experience air flying and leveraging a wind tunnel is not a new one. However, it's pushing the location and technological envelope further. The user is above the atmosphere in Stelco. If flight is not preferred, a pedestrian is still able to experience the steel bankhouse enclosure, venting cleansed air on the interior pass. The vents push clean air that can be seen blowing through the vegetation and felt on the skin of the passerby. Proposed pedestrian paths and revitalized shorelines will include indigenous vegetation to create ecological diversity with phytomediation. They are planted along exterior paths to aid in air filtration from the adjacent Stelco, along with air drones. The maximum height of these trees will always leave Stelco's flue stacks visible. With the addition of specific grasses, aquatic planting on the opposite side of the path for remediation can also continue to integrate natural resources into the landscape. Greenways and blueways are included to encourage people to travel towards the water. This eliminates the 100-year segregation by the industry in one location. Revitalized paths and biodomes maintain views to the industrial buildings for connection while providing opportunity for expansion. The paths are lined with rough textured pavers manufactured with harvested air particles. They typically range from light gray to black, depending on the collected suspended particles, carbon, and metal dust fugitives. They're slightly rough in texture, but provide an even surface for area for cycling or walking. During this phase, the panels under the large biodome are removed and recycled to allow for the water purifying biodomes to service beyond. The steel industry is maintained with this project proposal and healed with cogeneration practices for glass and steel making. This could increase employment that the community has not witnessed in many years. The goal is to repopulate the valuable waterfront to become a self-sufficient city with the help of purifying biodomes. Social improvement programming includes swimming, park design, and education within the large biodome, or now the community hub. Shortly after, the waterfront, commercial, business, residential, and other mixed-use properties could be integrated within the hub. These developments can benefit from similar resources and architectural expression as provided by the biodomes, protecting for future development. Stelco has the opportunity for adaptive reuse of their vacant buildings. To continue towards the future development, adjacent industrial piers are ranked with priority of remediation. They were determined with the current data pollution levels. Moderating and monitoring of all contaminating levels and biodome locations will continue within the app. They would serve to inform the public on where the piers are safe for recreational use or which ones to avoid. Decontamination allows for the smaller biodomes to travel as remediation machines to revitalize other sectors of the harbor. The water purifying biodomes continue to service the harbor while traveling back to the central location of the treatment plant. Soil and air purifying domes are constructed and transported to the new sites when needed. This allows for a patchy spread of remediation that eventually connects green spaces throughout the harbor. These paths always connect to the downtown core to eliminate the waterfront industrial versus pedestrian separation. Pedestrian waterfront access has been determined where the industry does not involve the use of water passage for operation. Goal at the end of the 50-year timeline for this project, once environmental cleanup and the building stock is sustainably efficient, the city will become a post-pollution metropolitan. The community hub would remain surrounded by the new crystalline waterfront clusters developed throughout the harbor. Hamilton would have a unique aesthetic visible from the Burlington Skyway. The circular comedy presented herein is designed for economic development on the piers to benefit business, society, and the environment through manufacturing, consumption, recycling, and reuse. The intent of the thesis was to explore the potential of a post-pollution world by exploring remediation techniques to engage the public realm in a mixed-use shoreline. Contaminated industrial sectors create both visible and invisible boundaries that isolate waterfront piers. Making these discarded waterfront spaces more appealing will encourage implementation of biodomes within other post-industrial communities. The design of biodomes in this thesis is particular to the toxin and local materials of a specific site, but the biodome framework can be manipulated to accommodate any solutions for urban waterfronts affected by heavy pollution. It should be cautioned that this thesis has speculated on the health and safety of the decontamination byproduct materials. These are relatively new processes that are costly, but the benefits and possibilities are not fully known. This design exploration is currently imaginative due to the financial burden, but it could become economically viable in the future of cleansing, building with waste resources, the industry in a different way. This is imperative to establish connection to the city and the surrounding area. These remediation machines generate a distinctive waterfront that contributes to an experiential journey from conscious to unconscious discovery. It exhibits a newly accommodated environment thriving within the industrial landscape. The biodome architecture engages with their environment, impacting the pedestrians the way that they feel, think, interact, and behave with them. They are encouraged to touch, listen, and see and smell the multisensory environment in a variety of scales and proportions. The pedestrians enter the centers of the biodomes, and careful attention was designed to influence the way people feel in short and long-term effect. The user navigates across the site on their own accord to articulate their own journey/story through the informational architecture for a post-pollution waterfront.
Okay. Is that finished now?
Yes, that's everything.
Great. Thank you very much, Alicia. So thank you for that video. The next step is to ask whether there are any questions from any of the panel that you didn't understand things or some clarifications that are needed, some more details about any particular aspect of the thesis before we get into a more sort of detailed discussion of the ideas. Particularly maybe Gail and Ari, since you haven't seen this before, if you have any things that you didn't understand or feel you need more information about.
Just clarity, and this picture that's on the screen, is my question. Is the thinking that the industry that's there, at least the industry that still has the potential to thrive, would be changed over time, would be eradicated over time? Like, what's the thinking in terms of the current industry and sort of the new intervention?
So I'm proposing. Oh, yep. I'm proposing for it to remain in operation and to be better practices going forward with how they go about the industry. And that's why I'm proposing that as they melt the steel, that heat can be used for vitrification. So it's kind of a big loop system so that they can both be active at the same time, but provide a safer place for pedestrians.
So the thinking that these industries would continue, but be educated on proper remediation processes, change in their processes towards a cleaner environment, cleaner scenario. So it's a shift in their process and thinking as well, and that's what you're proposing.
Yes.
Okay.
There's also the at the beginning of your document, you talked about the history of place before industry landed in this area. It was as with all our lands, indigenous territory. Can you speak to sort of the concept of indigeneity and how that, in your mind, translates into what you're proposing?
Well, what I'm trying to propose is that the waterfront used to be for fishing. It used to be for enjoying the water for travel means and everything like that, where now it's only for the industry in Hamilton. It's 78%, I think it was, is only industry, where they only have 2 piers, Pier 4 and Bayfront. Those ones are open, but they are only open some of the season for swimming because the water is so polluted there. So what I want to do is have a space for people to enjoy the water like they previously have, but in like a new way with the help of the biodome machines.
Right.
Ari, do you have any questions of clarification?
Not for now. I like just to really much congrats, Alicia. Amazing topic. I have many questions, but let's go deeply after. Thanks so much.
And I'd like to say the same, Alicia. This is just the read through was fantastic, and I do congratulate you on a very inspiring thesis document.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we have no other questions of clarification from Terry or Leila, I think we can get into more of a detailed discussion of the thesis. So I invite our guests who would like to start the first questioning and discussion. Gail, since you've got your microphone on, would you like to go first?
Sure. I have a list of things. In your document, you talk about, let me just start by saying your thesis is extremely clear throughout, from the setting of your thesis topic, building of precedent imagery, the understanding of place, and then getting to your resolution to the problem. Very clear, very well constructed, very concise. So it certainly wasn't an easy read. Graphic abilities and both the illustrative balance of the illustration and written also made for a clear understanding of certainly what you are trying to put forward in your thesis. So again, I certainly do congratulate you on that. Often there's a lot of graphic and the content doesn't come out clear. And I think you've really struck a fine balance between the two. And it's again, I think it's successful in that sense. One of the comments at the initial part of your document, you talk about public engagement, public, the pros and cons in some of your precedent examples of having the public voice participate in change in the lands, change in land use, change in thinking. And you talked a bit about in some cases, let's say the Granville Island one, which I'm most familiar with. That was government-owned land. Government took over the land, and there was less engagement required as a result of it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, because through your thesis, you emphasize the need for public participation. Throughout the years of intervention, your thesis builds on the idea of being able to experience the change as time goes on. So maybe compare, let's say, a Granville Island process where the lack of a need, I'll say, for public participation enabled a faster process, faster implementation process. Maybe speak to whether or not you feel engagement is critical to your process, and that it is definitely a slower timeline in terms of its implementation. Thoughts on pros and cons of the public participation process.
I would agree. There are definitely pros and cons to that. Like you said, it is a slower process at the end if you do engage the public, but when you engage the public, it does create a more meaningful place, because at the end of the day, it is for the visitors and foreign visitors, but mostly the community around it. And I really want to do something for that area, because near the front of the document, you can see that the industry has borders around some residential neighborhoods, and those ones are in need for support, and the need for better places for them to have a clean space to enjoy their time. So yes, we need to engage the community, but you also have to have principles and move forward with the design. So with vitrification, it does take a couple of years to actually create and harvest the glass, depending on the size. So that will give a good time frame to host some community meetings to see what other programs that the neighborhood would like to see inside of this new large biodome.
There'll be ongoing opportunities in this context for that level of community participation.
Right.
I can keep talking, but I do want to give others the opportunity.
Well, maybe I'll invite Ari now to comment.
Thanks, Mark. Alicia, first of all, congratulations. I imagine from the detail and the clear communication you share with us how deep your research was. This is something very important also for me to highlight, because first of all, I loved that you had one of reference Buckminster Fuller. This was also my thesis in my BA. When I started with this dome in Rome, in the University of La Sapienza, building with my colleague, they were completely out of any expectation. What's going on? Why a dome? Why this kind of visionary form to embody something very, very different of the structural, concrete idea of architecture? I really want to congratulate you for two main reasons, and then I have a question. The first things I like to reflect with you is that you really create a proposal I really want to see there in action. So this is not just, a utopistic way in order to say, okay, just because the reference from my research is so visionary, it's not applicable. It's completely the opposite. You tackle a system challenge that is very contemporary and put together different kind of element where the design principle are at the core of the real design process. So we are not just embellish or create, this marketing advertisement about the powerful dome that Buckminster Fuller can introduce as lexicon. I also appreciate a lot the paradigm shift in terms of the participatory turn. I'm very critic about the idea of participation and collaboration in the way nowadays architecture is introducing, in the terms of let the community participate in the design, having some, moment or spot highlight in which they can go with you and create their, let's say, a moment of reflection. I saw in your proposal a very actionable and active grassroots proposal that it's about design and engineering. It's about the intersection of disciplines that till now are very, very separate in silos. So this is also an advancement in terms of pedagogy in what we want to, achieve when sometimes we propose thesis in the architectural faculty, and then we have the problem to cross roads, different kind of disciplines. And then also the topic of Hamilton per se, it's very relevant for me, not only because it's part of my research, and I had lots of, interviewing processes with people there that were also indigenous community, but students and other kind of stakeholders. So the question for me is about, did you envisioning in a future the participation of different stakeholders that can be also policymaker, other kind of non-profit institution, or even citizen that are, for example, from informal groups. So a variety of ecosystem that can help you in push the proposal at another level. What do you think? I have also another element, but I save it for later. Thank you.
So you're asking, should we include other disciplines in this? Oh, yes. Yeah. For sure, because I know I'm not an expert on decontamination, and I tried studying vitrification as best as possible, but there wasn't enough information for me to feel confident in the way that we can build with this material, because typically the glass is just buried. They don't do anything with it. So we definitely need a bunch of research team and interdisciplinary to make this happen, to check the levels, to make sure that the moderating and everything is clean inside the dome to allow for the pedestrianization. And also, we really need the help of engineers to create such a large biodome too. And that will be with the adjacent Stelco and other steel industries too, that they can supply it. But it's a big feat to do, and I believe Hamilton is the best place for it because their nickname is Steel Town, or is what they like to call themselves. Yeah, I've been really enjoying this because I live in Hamilton, so this is a at-home project for me too. And I would love to see something like this occur with the help of a large team of experts.
Gail, you said you had more stuff you could bring up. Do you give you another chance?
Oh, I do. You tell me when to stop. I do have a history with Hamilton. My husband is from the Hamilton area, so I've spent a lot of time in the area, a lot of time on Cootes Paradise, a lot of time we're sailors as well, so we've been through the locks going back and forth. I've worked with the Hamilton Port Authority through work, and had a project, called Fisherman's Pier at the time, trying to deal with the remediation of part of the area. And so it's first of all, incredible topic to undertake, first of all, because it's a real challenge. But is evident just in being part of the experience of place, is that people relate to and identify with their industry. That even though there is pollution, even though, it's doing so much bad to the environment. The industry has been part of Hamilton. It's been part of their identity. So, I mean, this as an opportunity, could certainly be a way in which the city can showcase who they are and what they can be in terms of making a difference from a sustainable perspective, at a global scale. I guess I'd love to hear from you. How can you balance maintaining that cultural heritage, which is the industry, which is the steel, which is all that the industry is about, and what people identify with this concept of remediation that seems quite futuristic. One is the identity of history right next to what is futuristic. How do you marry those worlds, I guess? And part of me is thinking of sort of the indigenous concept or shift from what we talk about when we say place making, and that's about creating new, to more indigenous thinking, which is about place keeping, and it's about making sure that we are responding to and maintaining heritage of place, and making sure that we're not losing culture of place as well. From an indigenous perspective, of course, they're going back to before the industry was even there. So how in terms of the future state of the land, from certainly a landscape perspective, public realm perspective, a building perspective, can we balance and bridge maintaining that cultural heritage, I think both visibly and otherwise, while introducing a very new and futuristic concept, and making those worlds come together, because I think, and especially in this day, people are clinging more to their cultural heritage because it's important. In the context of COVID and catastrophe, people cling more to the concept of their cultural heritage and of place. So, in reading the thesis, I wanted to understand your thinking around balancing both of those, balancing the futuristic and the opportunities that can bring to the fore, plus maintaining cultural heritage, visible and otherwise. And you've already responded to sort of the indigenous ways in which we can address indigenous principles of place. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how the struggle to balance the two, if it is a struggle in your mind.
How do I start? Well, what's interesting about this land is where my site selection is. It's new land, so it's only been there for about at most 100 years, where all the natural landscape has been filled over basically for the whole harbor in Hamilton. So for the difference between placemaking and placekeeping is you're redeveloping this land now to give back to what was taken away. So we also have to keep it, because I don't want to take away this land that is newly manufactured. It just needs to be purified. So to keep the balance, to have the industry still working, to keep a sense of place and the community, it's kind of like juxtaposed with the contemporary style of the biodome, with this glass reflecting against the material and the iron color of Stelco. So that kind of keeps the futuristic and the old world together, and you will be able to see it from anywhere in the harbor. as a symbolic kind of imagery of the decontamination that is taking place and that needs to take place in order to allow the industry to flourish, but also so that it doesn't cause deindustrialization. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Sorry.
Yes, and sorry, my question, I think was loaded. And if I can, speak to some aspects of your thesis, which I think I applaud you on. To me, it speaks to, if you were to stand on the bridge and look down at your perception of this change, people can still see the industry, but they can see how the industry is moving towards a better world, making a difference, making that change, addressing sustainability. And that visibility, again, which I go back to identity, is extremely important. And I think what you're doing is you would be building a new identity for Hamilton, which is powerful. Because now, they will shift from being known as the pollutant city to the sustainable, city, responding to sustainability in, really, amazing ways. I think what you've shown in your proposal, the concept of people being able to be on site and participate in that change, responds to building that identity as well. The whole aspect of experiential learning, I think you've shown is part of your thesis, and I think that's really important as well. So I think it's really important to balance. And it's a challenge often to balance, maintaining that heritage for something that's been destroying the city for quite a while, but it's how people identify with Hamilton, and turning that around into different identity, a more powerful identity that speaks to change, I think is really dynamic.
Thanks, Gail. Ari, do you want to add anything more? Do you have any other comments or questions to Alicia?
Yeah, just one question, which is a bit added on Gail and critique a little bit, and ask Alicia something. I'm thinking that the first images I received when we talk about remediation, honestly, was more about your design as a medium that was more like incorporating other layers or other medium in order to add the possibility to be communicated differently. So in the moment I think about that behind remediation, there is your research question or your idea about a paradigm shift and a moving action that is not just interpret architecture or design as a symbol of a status, but is very much a continuity to a content that move toward a new generation and a more generative form of understanding. I find very relevant that your proposal is in Hamilton. So the context, again, is the remediation and is the invention of the new medium. And then there is something more that is about the concept of immediacy, which is very relevant when, okay, we think that this is futuristic, but Marshall McLuhan, or I don't know, the same Fuller, did it in a very, very special historical time that was also probably not really ready to receive the collaboration, the participatory turn, the even environmentalist aspect of it. So now you are back in this new phase in which we are in need to have new catalyst, and you are one of that. So I really kindly invite you to push this proposal in a very, applicable way. Don't just be afraid that, okay, this is the thesis, this is the end of a path. No. This is the starting point of something that can be the real remediation, because you are inventing the medium. And in the moment that you put together all those in communication, there will be something really relevant for us, that is learn your new lexicon. I'm very, very keen in supporting and see what's going on, because there is also another element that I really appreciate, that is the idea of water. When I interview all the indigenous community and the youth in this area, they teach me methodologies relating to water. How important is also the immersion in those rituals in order to regenerate the ability of reality to contact again with, more imaginative, or let's say speculative scenarios. And one of the methodology I use a lot in my teaching is design fiction. So I saw that very, very much in correspondence with your proposal, but also I saw water again as an element that can reshape and remediate in this appropriation of symbolic meaning, your new relation. I love this thesis, honestly. I'm very passionate about it. I want to be there with you and go again, interviewing people and see what's going on. I find it very fascinating. Congratulations, really.
Thank you so much.
Terry, I think you're second reader. Did you want to make any comments or ask any questions?
Yeah, I'll be brief. I've seen Alicia's project since the beginning of some of these ideas. And I think, I guess building on what Ari just picked up on about the water, I think the general theme of remediation in your project, Alicia, being both for sustainability, but also for human health and well-being, I think is really strong. So that you've really connected those really well, I think is really important. And the storytelling and the way that you've told us the story of the history, that's clearly very important to you. So I hope that this app that people can use will give them some insights about this place having a story, not just how can you navigate to see the different, soil, air, water kind of thing. And I guess connected to that, I really appreciate that this final document that I've seen has more of that kind of eye level perspective, more of the people in this place. And perhaps in your conclusion section, you could connect back to the early ideas about blue biophilia, because I was looking for that at the end, and I was looking for that connection to people. And I know that you're in Hamilton, and I felt like in your conclusion, you were trying to be a bit removed. It was very much about the system. But I think in your actual conclusions about this project is that you're making a better place for people. So I would bring some of that thinking into the conclusion. So how people could use the water again, and how you could connect to the blue biophilia, and maybe even a little connection about bringing the health and well-being aspect, because I think your project would really make a really direct connection. And I think the educational component is my favorite part of this thesis, this like visualizing things happening. I think it's super cool. I have quite a few more detailed notes, which I'll send you in an email, which relate to the document. But those were my main thoughts about the health and well-being and sustainability being connected, and the bringing back the talk about people at the end.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll definitely include that. It'll just add the story, a nice cohesive ending. Thank you for that comment. Yeah.
Even an eye level, like bring one of your eye levels of because you have a dream for this place at the end of it. So an eye level of industry and people cohabiting this waterfront. I don't know, or maybe shifting something from earlier in the story. Yeah.
Leila, did you want to make any comments or add anything?
Oh, thank you so much, Alicia, for your presentation, and thank you to both the guests and all the committee members. I think Alicia has heard me enough, but briefly I would say thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure working with you. I think this is a very ambitious project, and it thinks not only the project, as our guest mentioned, but also the processes, and you're trying to integrate them and to kind of understand or understand them from the ground to implement them in the project. And I think that's extremely worthwhile. So thank you for spending so much energy in doing that. I also appreciate your perspectives that have advanced a lot, and we start feeling the qualities. Of course, that's not it's central, but it's not the only aspect, as the guest mentioned. It's not about aestheticizing the landscape, but it's really about understanding how this can happen. And I appreciate your speculation about the industries co-generating, so being involved in creating this new industry, maybe in another way. So to a rebirth or a rethinking of them. And of course, I fully agree with all of these comments about cultural, about aspects, cultural heritage, identity. So you tried not to touch really the industry that is still functioning, to really preserve it, but so the questions about place making, place keeping are very important. And I think we started hearing about it, and maybe this can come a little bit more in your conclusion in your document. So I don't have much to thank you. It's been a real pleasure working with you. And thank you to all the guests for their comments.
Great, thank you. Marco, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, just very briefly, because I think all the kind of substantive stuff about the project has been talked about. It's an enormously ambitious project, very complex. There's always going to be, there's a million things you can't possibly think about, but the ones that you have thought about, I think you've thought about very well. I just want to echo something Gail said earlier, just about the quality of the document and the clarity. Very, very mature, very professional piece of work from that side. Very easy to follow. You state your position, you back it up, you argue it. You know, there's. I was just looking back through my notes from the previous milestones, because I just drop into this project at the milestones, right? So I'm seeing it every few months. I'm very struck by the clarity of your process, the consistency, the discipline of it. And that's not that common, you know, like it's something we'd like to see more kind of systematically in the thesis, but I think it speaks to your experience and maturity, that you're able to maintain that kind of stamina and the clarity of your process through the whole thesis. So very well done.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add one thing. I mean, I think a lot of things have been said. I wanted to say that I'm really pleased that you, from the last milestone, you looked a bit more, I think, into the potential of some of the reused and recycled materials and of the vitrified glass and so on. I think that we could go on with that. That's a whole set of projects in itself, just looking at that technology. But I think the fact that you started to actually look at how you could build these domes and how you could use these materials, and what sort of architecture can come from it, what sort of actual materiality could come from it. I think that's great, and I'm pleased you went down that route. I mean, I have a lot of questions about how much how much you mentioned yourself that there's not enough information to really make solid decisions around this, so you had to speculate to some degree. It'd be really interesting to maybe think about what would be the next steps in actually trying to move forward to developing that as a system. But I think it's great that you did actually take that on to some degree. So I'll stop there. I think I'll just invite if there's any other real final points. We really need to wrap up because we need to move on. But any final points before we wrap up from anybody?
I'd just like to say, I think your thesis is sophisticated enough that I would encourage you to, take your presentation to the Port Authority, and give them a vision of the future or what the future can be like. There's constant conversation around how to incentivize these industries to do better. And I think this will give them food for thought. So I'd encourage you to seriously consider knocking on the door I'm happy to connect you with, those that I know at the Port Authority, because I think this is a presentation that they should see.
Awesome.
Great. Okay, so I think we need to wrap up the public part of the presentation. So thank you for the audience for joining us, and we're now going to disconnect from the broadcast. So Mike, can you switch it off?